My name is Cheria, and for a living, I turn workplaces into growth spaces. This podcast is a front row seat into my own personal and professional development as I talk with inspiring people about the growth that takes place at the intersection of work and life. Welcome to Grow There with Cheria. Welcome to season 2. I am so happy you're here. For those of you who are joining us for the first time, thank you so much. I'm so glad you found your way here. We are going to have a great time. And, I was reflecting on season 1. One of my favorite things about it was that after every episode, a whole different subgroup of people would reach out to me about why that episode resonated so much with them. And it just went to show that there is something for everyone in this podcast. And this season is no different. I can't wait for you to hear from our phenomenal guests. They're amazing. Before we dive in, a little bit of housekeeping. Listen, if you enjoyed season 1 and if you're starting to enjoy season 2, do me a favor. Go give the podcast 5 stars wherever you're listening. If you're feeling very generous, write a little comment to say that you love it. It really helps. And if you plan on giving it anything less than 5 stars, just don't bother. It's fine. It's fine. I'm just kidding. You can give it whatever stars you want, but 5 stars is ideal. Okay, housekeeping is out of the way. I was thinking about this concept. I used to run camp programs back in the day. And to this day, there's so much that I steal from that work that I use in my current work. And one of the things we used to talk about is this concept of something being challenged by choice. And we'd use it often when we were running a team builder, let's say, and we would be setting up some, awkward team builder. And we'd say, this is challenge by choice, meaning if you don't want to do it, you don't have to do it. And even when you do it, you get to decide how you're engaging in that thing, whether you're going full out, whether you're only doing parts that you feel the most comfortable with. You get to decide. You also get to decide if you bow out in the middle of it. It's all challenge by choice. And as I think about all of the moments, the intersection of work and life that people are presenting in this podcast, it's usually some kind of challenge where they have the choice. They have all the autonomy to make the choice. Even if the challenge was imposed on them, they are then deciding how they're going to meet that challenge. And when I think about our guest today, he was met with an incredible challenge that was very public. And he made a very unique decision to move forward in a way that not many people do. And I'm really excited for you to hear from our guest because this is the first time that Nick Tran is sharing this story. If you don't know who Nick Tran is, he has a reputation of transforming brands into cultural icons. And you're about to understand what I mean by that when I share with you some of these brands. So, first of all, he was an executive at brands like Hulu, Samsung, and Taco Bell. Shout out to my love affair with bean and cheese burritos from there. But where you might know Nick from is the fact that he was the former global head of marketing at TikTok, where he led campaigns that turned that platform from a rising app to a worldwide phenomenon. Beyond marketing, his influence extends into media and entrepreneurship. He executive produced the critically acclaimed Genius trilogy, and he's an angel investor in some pretty cool brands. Forgive me as I geek out. Liquid Death, Away Travel, which is I never leave home without my away luggage. Olipop, I'm a huge fan of their cream soda, and a lot of times they're out of it. So if you see Olipop cream soda, grab me one, please. Thank you. And Therabody. If you haven't used a Therabody product, I mean, you're missing out. So pretty cool brands. He's also been recognized everywhere. He was recognized by Fortune and Ad Age's 40 Under 40, Adweek's Brand Genius, and Forbes' Most Influential CMO. He also led TikTok to win Ad Age's Marketer of the Year in 2021. Nick is a truly talented individual, and I can't wait for him to share his story like he's never shared it before. So, without further ado, it's time to grow there with Nick Tran.
Nick Tran, it's amazing to have you here. Thank you for being here.
Yes, thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to chat with you.
Oh my gosh, I am so excited too. And I was thinking about how this just brings me so much joy because we both know Ross Martin, who it was on this podcast last season and was a fan favorite. And I feel like Ross is just like the greatest connector of people. So I know you and I have been in some Zoom rooms together in the past, but to actually be able to sit down and have a conversation feels really fun.
Yeah, Ross is not only a great connector, he's just such like a kind person so that when he makes the connections, it goes beyond just business stuff and transactional type stuff. And you just want to get to know the people that he connects you with at a deeper level. So I just love all of Ross's connections for sure.
Oh my gosh. I couldn't agree more. It's such a pleasure to connect with you, and it's funny because I feel like our podcast episode was just one giant love fest. So I feel like people listening already know, yeah, we know you love Rob.
Yeah. I mean,
Um,
we won't talk about him anymore then. So forget him.
yes, he's done. It's done, gone. Um, Well, Nick, you know why we're here, and I'm so excited for the story that you're gonna share today. We're here talking about the intersection of work and life and what happens, what kind of growth happened at that intersection. And so I just want to dive in and let you tell me about a time in your life when something happened at that intersection that eventually really was a catalyst for growth in your life.
Yeah. Thank you for wanting to talk about this topic. I think oftentimes when you get to a certain level in your career, everyone wants to know more about the career side and the more like educational side of how you got to where you ended up getting to. And
Mm,
what I've found out in time is that as you move up in your career, you actually start to realize how important other factors of your life are, and that the thing
yeah.
that you work so hard at might, end up being deprioritized as you get older and as you like get into different phases of your life. So I just think it's amazing that we can talk about our stories in a more holistic manner here versus it just being a
Yeah.
specific track about like success and business and marketing and all that fun stuff. So yeah, as far as that moment in my life, I find that it's rare that you have a situation or a scenario that unfolds that makes you pause and rethink things. And I think I've heard a lot of friends talk about health
Mhm.
issues or a death of a family member as being that catalyst and trigger. And I think those are, somewhat more traumatic in my mind. And I haven't, yet fortunately had to deal with that. But I I see actually something similar with like a lot of my friends in Los Angeles who may have lost their homes because of the fire. They're also at
Yeah.
that intersection where they're
Yeah.
now step back and reprioritizing everything, from the stuff that they had to the life that they built and
Yeah.
what they do with their life moving forward. So it's rare when you have something that um, disrupts your life and your routine and your career plan. I'll call it that in a way. But for me, it was when I was fired at TikTok. And at that moment in my
Mm.
career was the most fun that I had ever had. Uh, Being able to be part of TikTok
Yeah.
early on and help grow the community and help build the brand and help expand it to different regions was probably one of the highlights of my career to the point where I was doing an interview about a year into the role. It might have been either Ad Age or some publication that had given us some award. I think we were like Ad Age's Marketers of the Year or something along those lines. And in one of the questions,
Mm.
the journalist had asked me if you could trade places with any CMO at any company today, who would it be and why? And normally I feel very comfortable answering a question off the cuff and, not having like a prepared or canned answer. But in that moment, I was just cycling through all of my favorite brands. I was cycling through all the people in the industry that I admire and respect. But in that moment of my life, I could not think of a single company or CMO that I'd want to trade places for because TikTok was having unprecedented growth. It was sort of like the darling of the marketing industry. And we were, really moving quickly and evolving the way that marketing was happening that I said at the time, honestly, I don't wanna sound, like cliche, but I feel like I have the best job in the industry. I'm guiding a brand that I'm very excited about, and I don't think there's anyone that I would trade places with. And it's in those moments where you feel almost like content and almost like you're at, like, the peak of, like, a summit where I think, like,
Yeah.
whether you believe in a higher power spiritually or religiously or whatever, it's in those moments that I feel you're thrown a challenge or something that comes your way that makes you reevaluate everything, and it was in that moment where
Mm.
I literally said, "There's no place else I'd rather go, there's nothing I no places I would trade for," that I ended up getting the rug pulled out from under me and ended up not having that job anymore from, external forces and not my choosing, and getting to the point where I had to take a step back, reevaluate the journey that I'd been on, and reprioritize what was most meaningful in my life and what was important. Because I recognized at that moment that what you built and spent all of your time and effort and energy to cultivate could be
Yeah.
taken away instantly. So why not try to like build around the things that are more foundational and not just the thing that you might be chasing because society or, whatever it is telling you to go chase.
Yeah. Gosh, I think there's so many layers to this, and it's so good, and thank you so much for being willing to share this part of your life because I think
Yeah.
it's a part that people just don't talk about, and
Yeah.
yet we've had hundreds of thousands of people get laid off in the last couple of years,
Sure.
have, um who have had now that experience at least of their career being pulled the rug being pulled out from under them, and when you see it at the scale that you were sitting at, I think it's fascinating to really, um I'd love to dive in more
Yeah.
to what that ended up looking like, when you started reprioritizing. What were the things that were coming to mind for you that felt like they were more important to be investing your time in?
Yeah. I think the biggest one, which is I think fairly obvious, is just time with your family, especially your kids. Um, I had been working, nonstop for over a decade, and during that time, my I have 2 children, but my kids were born, and my mindset at the time was that, "Oh, well, they're so young. It's
Mm,
okay if I'm, working and grinding and doing all the things now because I'm just gonna help prepare us or set us up for more time in the future." And I think
mm,
the unfortunate circumstances that we find ourselves in, especially in, ambitious circles, is that you end up not finding that time, and all the things that you end up delaying, you may not get that opportunity to come back to, right? So,
yeah.
um, I look back and I think about my kids when they were 0 to 1, and they were like fleeting memories that I have of that period because I was working a lot and I was traveling a lot. So, I basically only saw them a day or 2 out of the week, for
Mm,
that, like, 0 to 1 period. And, they get a little bit older, so, like, that 1 to 3 age range is, like, another window where they become, like, little toddlers and they're still babies and, it's another, like, very, very interesting age that I also didn't didn't immerse myself as much with. So, by the time I had that moment at TikTok, it helped me realize that the thing that I was missing the most was that. So, my wife and I
mm,
decided to reevaluate and reprioritize, our lives. We ended up moving abroad to London, where I am now,
mm,
and the idea was if we could take this mid-career sabbatical, almost like our, personal halftime, if you call it,
mhm.
reflect, reset our approach to life, but also recharge and get to the place where we're excited about working on something again. It would be a pivotal time in our kids' lives because at the time they were 4 and 6. Um,
Mm.
to really just like be a dad, be a parent, be present, and not have all these other responsibilities looming over, you know me? And I'm
Yeah.
really aware that not everybody is in the, situation or has the circumstances or means to be able to just take that time off. But I always
Sure.
tell everybody I know, whether it's a month, whether it's 6 months, whether it's a year, like whatever time you can afford comfortably to have a mid-career sabbatical, especially if you have like family or passions that you really want to explore, there's no better time to do it than, like, now. And that if you
Yeah.
you might actually uncover so many lessons and, different mindsets or perspectives that might open you up to be an even better leader or a better executive or a better manager from a career perspective, that it might not be a bad thing to take that time and also explore who you are as a individual leader yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, gosh, I feel like you're speaking my language because I feel like one of the things that I've tried really hard to do in this life is to create a practice of coming into alignment with myself. But part of that involved me taking time, you know. I was laid off unexpectedly from a job that I loved.
Mhm.
There was good reason. I had a lot of support around me, including yeah, including the organization I was working for with, I guess, full disclosure, I guess I can just say it that, I worked at Known with Ross, who everybody knows I love and adore.
Yeah.
And, there were lots of moves that needed to happen. And when I was laid off from that job, I had to take that step back and think, what am I gonna do? And, I was very fortunate because both Ross and our CEO there, Kern, said, "We really think you should do this work on your own, and we wanna support you, and we wanna become your first client," and I was very supported in that, but for a moment, I thought, I really need to take some space to ask myself, who is it that I wanna be, and does this next thing align? And so I made the decision to start my business, but I
Yeah.
took a couple months off in between to just be, to just center down, on who I am. And so I think that there are so many people out there, to your point, it might not be able to take off an extended amount of time, but one of the other things I do is I have a retreat practice where I've created my own personal retreat practice with a friend of mine. So 2 times a year, we go out and we spend a weekend just hunkering down, evaluating our lives, taking stock of what's going on. Where are we in alignment? Where are we out of alignment?
Yep.
But it's shocking how few people make space for that, you know?
Yeah.
Um, and so I think it's incredibly impressive that you, especially when you're in this high power role, everybody's looking at you. They're looking for what's your next move? For your next move to have been your family and you and coming into alignment with what it is that you want, I think is such a powerful leadership move that I hope people listening, like, really let that sink in.
Yeah.
Um,
I
I
mean, to
yeah.
be honest, uh, it wasn't something that I intentionally, like, went into in the beginning. I think my
Mm,
first reaction was probably similar to what a lot of people feel when they either are laid off or let go or they have a change in, their job. Um, it was this sort of shock that that had happened because we were obviously, like, doing really well, everything was going well, and we were successful. So it was almost this sense of denial, like, "There's no way this is actually happening, like, something must be wrong, like, what's happening overall?" And then it got to this moment where, "Okay, well, then I have to just get into the mode of things, I have to put myself out there, I need to go and explore new opportunities, and I wanna just make sure that I can, recover, quote, unquote, as quickly as
mhm.
possible." And had it not been for folks in my circle who had this type of experience and also, like, have a public persona where a lot of this was, like, covered,
Yeah.
more broadly, um, it almost helped me personally that it wasn't a journey that I was handling alone, and because the news was so, like, rampant, it
Mm,
almost sent a signal out, almost like like the bat signal for me, where people recognize like, "Oh, no, something is happening. Let me reach out to Nick and just make sure he's doing okay." And that
mm.
outpouring of support also came with a lot of advice and a lot of guidance and a lot of mentorship from people that, I've been able to become close with over the years who've said specifically, don't jump into something right away. Like
Yeah.
take this space and, instead of jumping into all the sorts of myriad of things that could come your way right now, uh, we encourage you to say no more than you'd want to say yes. And even if it
Mhm.
feels right, it's almost like your mind trying to convince you that it's right because you're in this denial and want to like recover stage. So
Yeah.
it really helped to have people that have been through this before tell me, take this time, take this space, and let's focus on the things that matter most. And so they asked me very, very, openly, do you want to start, a business? Is it like the entrepreneurial path that's exciting you? And I kind of, at the time just said like, honestly, I really want to hang out with my kids. And then that's when they said,
Mm.
and that's what you're going to do. And it was almost them pushing me to just focus on that. That helped me go on this journey that I've been on over the last couple years and be more present and like conscious of being a dad first and then looking at what's next.
Yeah. I'm so curious if you'd be willing to share, once you finally gave yourself that permission, what did that feel like?
It was a big sense of relief and a bit of this, almost like feeling of like guilt. I mean, I have a very probably similar story to a lot of other people with like, first generation American, family immigrated from Vietnam with the
Mm.
sole purpose to try to have me be set up to succeed, like literally like an immigrant story. And it's tough when you're not only coming from that background, but also an only child to
Mm.
feel like you have permission to just take a step back and reflect because you're told from an early age that, the world is hard and that you have to get out there and you got to like wake up before everybody and stay out like, working until after everyone else is done just to try to like
Yeah.
catch up and make it in this country, in this world, in this place. And it took me a little bit of time to let myself not because of any other pressures, but just like my internal, you know,
Sure.
desire to try to like be successful and, do right by my parents and acknowledge the sacrifice that they made and not disappoint anyone, even though they weren't putting that pressure on me. I just felt like I didn't want to disappoint anyone. And
Mm.
it 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 made me realize that I was making decisions that I shouldn't have made because I was driven by fear and not
Mm.
being driven by passion or love ultimately, right? Love, not like
Yeah.
a romantic sense, but like, in the love of what you do. And it
Yeah.
was a moment where I said, okay, like I'm making wrong decisions. I'm going down these like paths that I shouldn't be going because I'm anxious and I'm fearful. So when I decided to take that time, move to London, travel, spend time with the kids, it opened up not only this sense of like, okay, I don't need to feel guilty about this. I don't need to feel this like, unnecessary pressure. But then it also expanded my thinking, my approach, creativity, everything to say, now that you're
Yeah.
not holding all this, the possibilities for what you might want to do and how you might want to look at the world is now like a lot bigger than where it
Yeah.
initially was. And that's when I was just like this, mind blowing moment where it's just like, oh my gosh, everyone should have this epiphany and everyone, should experience this, which is why I was so, adamant about telling every friend I had, take a mid-year sabbatical or not mid-year,
Yeah.
mid-year sabbatical because it'll change the way you think about things in a profound way.
Oh, gosh. Well, and I think it's so good because there's all these articles about how the new midlife crisis is actually like more self-care, like more doubling down on self. And, I don't love that term midlife crisis. And I'm not saying you're midlife. I'm just saying like I feel like I'm definitely midlife. But I feel like we're with the certain amount of privileges that we have just by being born in the time that we've been born in and the
Yeah,
way that the working world works. Um, and again, keeping in mind that there are many people in this world, same as what you were talking about, who don't have those same privileges. With the
yeah,
privileges that we have, there is there is more space than we realize to actually step back and confide in ourselves to find out, are we are we self-actualizing in a way that we are intentionally choosing for ourselves, or have we, like, put ourselves in the machine and just pressured ourselves to keep going? And so I think there's a lot of people out there who have dreams deferred, who have ideas that they haven't made space for or haven't felt like they could make space for. And I think what you're saying in terms of a midlife sabbatical, or just the idea of making space to really center down on what matters to you. And are you living the life you want to live? Or are you living a life that you fell into and you just kept going, you know? I think it's a great question for people listening to just check in with themselves about, you know? Um, so I'm so appreciative of that. And I'm just curious, you know, when you look at all of this and you think of maybe, you know, the personal growth that has come from taking this midlife sabbatical, how would you sum up your growth?
There's probably a couple ways to summarize it. On one hand, I was fortunate enough to join the Henry Crown Fellowship
Mm.
um, during this time. I think I started my fellowship in 2022, and it just completed this past year in 2024. And having some structure was actually beneficial for me. It
Mm,
like a seminar, you learn about being a better leader, and the whole premise of it is, bringing like-hearted and not necessarily like-minded people together to try to
yeah.
build a venture or something that creates good in society. And I think having that structure helped me grow during that period as a leader that had not only more sense of like empathy, but also recognition of the impact that you have beyond just like the circle that you're in. So like the idea whether it's global impact or beyond your community or whatever it might be. But I think the Henry Crown Fellowship was such a big component of my, road to, understanding what I wanted to prioritize. Because it
Mm,
also put you in a cohort with a lot of other people who are successful, but also at this inflection point in their life where
mm,
they recognize that they want to make a little bit of a change or a pivot. So that was like one aspect where I really felt like I grew as a leader through that sense of structure. As a parent and as a like, partner slash like, husband, it really allowed me to take a little bit more like care, I would say, into the moments, and not just always look at like the end result, right? So like I remember when I was first having my kids, the idea was, oh, I want to set them up so that they'll be successful down the road, like when they grow up, essentially. So I was like, what can I do to help them be successful humans later in life? And I
yeah,
didn't really focus in on the little micro moments that are so incredible that kind of
mm,
help shape them and also help shape you as a parent. And taking that time to like, recharge and also have my perspective switched, I was cherishing every little aspect of their growth, and then also seeing the impact that that had by being so much more present and doing things with them in a more hands-on manner than I was before, which was not
mm,
fulfilling for them, I hope, but also very fulfilling for me. And it made me realize how much of life is summed up to like a few different dynamics. And the dynamic that you have as a leader at a company, especially at an executive level, it's not that different from being a parent who cares about their children because you care about your team. But at some point, you might realize that you might be doing something to your child that
mhm,
is not necessarily helpful to them, even though it seems like it is at the time. Or you might be doing something that might be very helpful for them, but that it actually hurts them in that moment. And as a parent,
yeah,
look at the longer, time scale. It's a necessary thing that you have to do to teach them a lesson or to help them grow or to help them be independent. And in the same way that you explained what happened with you at known, but then Ross and Kern encouraging you to go off and do this,
yeah,
almost like having a parent be like, I know this is gonna not feel great now, but in the long
yeah,
run, I'm hopeful that this is gonna make you more successful and become more of what you want to be and help you develop into someone that's a little more independent. And I think that dynamic, being more immersed, made me realize that the relationships that we have with our teams, with our, group, it's not necessarily easy to say like it's all just family, because I don't actually believe that either. Like, companies are companies and family is family. But like, there are some relationships where you can draw some lessons from and then apply, in that kind of structure. And I also love thinking about like relationships as a whole, whether it's a brand relationship with their customers or a person with like people. Relationships are very, universal. And I think there's so many
Mm.
lessons both sides on how to be a better and more effective leader, and also a better and more effective human.
Yeah, gosh, I couldn't agree more. I feel like this is gonna be a little soundbite because that was some great wisdom you were spitting there. I think it's interesting when to talk about how you've grown, and one of the things you just basically said was doubling down on your kids' growth is what really was helping you to grow. And I think there's something when we think about relationships, to your point, relationships are so beautiful and so dense with all these micro experiences that when we actually think about how we are supporting one another in their own growth, it helps us grow ourselves.
100%.
And there's this reciprocity in relationships that we take for granted so often. And I think what I'm hearing you say is really centering down and and spending time with your kids and thinking about your other relationships, that what I'm hearing you say is that that has woken you up to more things, to more of your creative sensibilities, to more of your optimism for the future. And I think that's a really beautiful thing. And frankly, I mean, that's why I'm doing this podcast
Yeah.
is to talk about how we propagate growth in the world. And it's not usually compartmentalized. It's in these strange moments of, we're what do you call it? It's like I'm trying to think of like botany, where it's like you need a combination of things for growth to happen. And you're highlighting that really perfectly. So I'm curious, you know, obviously I work in the world of organizational culture and
Yep.
transforming cultures. So I'm curious if you were to give advice to businesses or business leaders on
Mm.
how your story or something that you've learned in what you've shared today would be useful to them with their cultures or in being intentional about how they shape their culture, what would it be?
Ooh, I think that's a great question that makes me think of a few different potential opportunities to explore. But being a leader, in my mind, especially now, like post my like sabbatical, it's less about knowing all the right answers or having all the answers, and being the most curious person in the room. And I think oftentimes leaders feel this sense of responsibility or burden that they need to have all the answers, and that
Mm,
when people come to them, they should, be able to immediately make a decision on something. And though that's helpful at times, I do think the leader in the room should be the most curious. They should be gathering as much insight and information as they can from all groups, in order to like have the most informed decision. And I think
mm,
oftentimes as leaders, we forget that we need the space and the time to make the best decision. And that doesn't mean you got to sit on it forever, but like, I found that the more curious I am, whether it's as a parent or as an executive, the better the decision making ends up being. So that's like
mm,
aspect. I think another thing about being a leader is there's this fine line that I found in my career of being relatable and familiar, I'll call it, versus being respected and inspiring. And it's a
mm,
line to like draw when you're looking at like internal cultures. So I'll give you an example where at one point, and I won't say who it was, but one of my managers in the past, so someone that I was reporting to, they'd offered me the chance to just let go of a portion of the team that they felt was underperforming, and
Mm,
I felt odd about not making the decision myself and coming into this new role and saying, "Okay, like, I'm gonna manage this, significantly sized team, and if I'm gonna do that, I don't wanna showcase that I'm not caring." So, what I wanna do is, like, really get to know all the people on the team and then make the decision on my own versus having that decision made for me as I'm stepping in. And the manager that I had basically said, "If you want, we can reduce, the team as you're stepping in, or you can figure out and make that decision on your own once you've gotten to know the team a little bit more." And I made the decision to get to know the folks because I thought that the perception of me would be more positive if I took that time, got to know people, and then made the decision from my perspective and not from someone else's perspective. Um, it ended up being a situation where it backfired on me because as I
mm,
know people and they started to form a relationship with me, they were more upset that I was now making the
sure.
decision to, like, let them go. And the manager at the time that I had told me it was at that moment that I knew you wouldn't be able to become the CMO of this company, and
Mm,
that you were too focused on being well liked and being everyone's friend and not
wow.
making hard decisions to do what was best for the company and the individuals because they were going to get let go anyways. You end up making the same decision that we would have made. The only difference is it
I
took you
know.
3 extra months to do it. They felt they were strung along. They're now just as bitter as they would have been
Right.
had you not taken that time. And
Mm,
you don't want to be liked by everyone and invited to all the happy hours and all those things. You just want people to respect and be inspired by you so that you can lead them to do great work. And that
mm,
pivot mind helped shape the sort of like back half of my career where I stopped trying to be, everyone's friend and be involved with all the like, social elements of
yeah.
the work life and culture and just wanted to be there to be either a mentor, a teacher, a coach, or someone that could inspire people's best work. And I found that that relationship ended up being better than trying to be like in the thick of it as everyone's friend.
Gosh, that's so powerful, and honestly, it's powerful because so many people often want to get to that seat and climb to that seat where they have that kind of responsibility, but then don't know what that kind of responsibility feels like and whether or not they actually want it or have the
Yeah.
personality for it or whatever, and so I think being able to learn that, yeah, that I mean, it just feels wildly impactful. It makes me think about many things, many things and many times when tough decisions when you have to make these tough decisions and you're really thinking about how 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 you come to the table with your whole self and
Mhm.
how the business sometimes requires something different from you and how to reconcile that can be really tough.
Yeah.
Can be
And
really tough.
the other hard part that I find is that very few people are trained, like actually trained to become a leader. I think
Yeah.
oftentimes you become a very, well-respected and amazing individual contributor. So then you get thrown into a
Mhm.
managerial position and then you just kind of
Yeah.
fumble your way through being a manager. And then you're doing well at being a manager. So then they throw you into managing a larger team and you
Mhm.
stumble through the career ladder where you're learning at each stage, you're trying to like navigate it, you're doing your best, you're making some mistakes. And I think very few companies, which is why I also think what you're doing is interesting, take the time to really equip their teams and their leaders to be better and more effective leaders and build a core organizational culture that is a place that everyone is being their not only like whole self, but also bringing their best work
Yeah.
to life. And so whenever people say like, what's your ambition when you step into a new, executive leadership role? I always say that like my job isn't to, you know, make the best work anymore. My job is to inspire people to have their best work come to life here. Because if you just do it
Yeah.
as an individual, there's only so much you can get done. But if you inspire hundreds of people to do their best work, that amount of, um, I don't like compound interest is the only thing I can think of that
Mhm.
come
Sure.
bring this like exponential factor to life far outweighs what I could do as an individual at this point. So that's where I just feel
Yeah.
like reframing need to be less about you and more about inspiring the team to do their best work, especially like in the course of their career, is where I feel the magic really happens for an internal culture.
Yeah. Couldn't agree more. It's so funny because I have a really wonderful client who asked me to build out a leadership program for their kind of, up and coming leaders, and so we built out this amazing program. They all went through it. It was, like, just really good leadership development. But then what this organization realized is none of the leaders above them, none of middle management or above have any of these skills. Now we've got
Yeah.
these emerging leaders who have all these skills but can't speak the language with the leaders
Yeah.
that are leading them. And so it is so true. There's such a gap in so many, like so much leadership training that people really crave, because you're out there trying to lead to the best of your abilities, but it can be really hard. So I think that's a great thing to highlight. Um, Nick, this has been truly such a great conversation, and I want to get into our rapid fire, but I want to first just say thank you so much for sharing this particular story in this part of your life. I think you said when we hopped in that this is the first time you're really talking about this story, and that feels like such a privilege to me. But I just think it's going to resonate with so many people. They're going to feel seen and heard, especially now. So I'm really grateful for that.
Yeah, my hope also is that it inspires people to feel like an external factor, whether it's getting, laid off or whatever it might be, that situation might be a great catalyst for having this mid-career sabbatical, and that there shouldn't be this stigma of like, "Oh, there's a year gap on your resume." Like, what is
Oh,
that
no.
gonna do? How's that impact you? So I just feel like most people, need to be reminded that that year gap can be justified easily if you have some personal growth that you had during that time, and that I don't think recruiters or employers are as like, critical about those moments as they used to be, and that taking that
Yeah.
time might actually end up setting you up for something much bigger and better than, obviously just jumping into something that's available at that moment.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. I can't wait for people to write in and tell me that they were inspired to take this leap.
I hope so.
Um,
Yes.
yeah, yeah. Okay, well, these are some rapid fire questions. Are you ready?
Yes.
Um, Here we go. So fill in the blank. Growth is.
Um, Self-awareness and reflection.
Hmm. What was the very first thing you realized you were good at? And I'm talking like as a kid.
Oh gosh, as a kid, tests.
Tests. Oh my God. I
Yeah,
wish
yeah.
I was good at tests.
Yeah, I had this natural ability to take tests, so I never had to study as much. I didn't really have to even prepare in most situations. And I
Wow.
remember like when I was in college, I want to say, I ended up taking most of the tests, like the GMAT, the LSAT, and all that stuff, because I thought they were fun. So,
Oh my
yeah, it was a
God.
really weird thing about being able to just take tests and do well in them on them.
That's incredible. My SAT scores will go with me to the grave. So I am test taking is the worst thing for me, but I am so happy for you. Um, what was your first job?
My first job was folding clothes at Banana Republic.
Oh man. Folding clothes, there's something about, well, it really just takes me back. I mentioned this in the bumper that obviously you were executive producer on Genius, so I can't help but think of
Yeah.
Kanye at the Gap. So
Yeah,
yeah, folding clothes at Banana Republic.
yeah, which is part of the Gap family, but yeah, I was,
Yeah.
in high school and I wanted to get a job. A couple of my friends and I, we ended up going to the mall and putting in a bunch of applications, and I ended up getting a job at Banana Republic, where I wasn't even able to be at the cash register. I was just literally folding clothes and kind of off to the side and not really being seen and helping customers when they needed certain sizes, and then eventually getting to the cash wrap. and thinking like, wow, this is great. Like I feel like a sense of
Wow.
not only like pride about moving up into this, small microcosm of like of life, but also just feeling like the sense of accomplishment to get to something like kind of made
Yeah.
me realize that like, oh, you work hard and you do something well and you can like earn your way up to the next thing. So that kind of started my whole I
Mm,
guess like, being in the workforce.
love that. Who was the best boss you ever had?
Oh boy.
No
Luckily there's
pressure, all your former bosses
you
listening
know,
in.
I know. So I was gonna say, like, luckily I've had a lot. So I'll be honest. I've been very
Yeah.
fortunate. I've had a lot of great managers and bosses. It, uh, I say this often, but Tressie Lieberman was probably the
Mm,
most impactful, uh, mostly because of the timing that of my life when she was managing me, and it was just very transformative. So she came in to Taco Bell to lead like the digital social media team, and I had came in as a social media intern, as an intern, and I ended up going into the social media team. But it was so new, like the world of marketing, and I
mm,
had so much to learn at that time. But, from the person who hired me, to then Tressie, who, like, brought me into her team 6 months after I was hired, and then being able to grow there under a leader that was, like, incredibly talented, very empathetic, but also, uh, she has this ability to not feel any, like, sense of "ownership," quote, unquote, or, like, ego.
mm.
So when press had reached out to talk about a project, she instead of like what most managers do, like they would take that interview and run with it. She would be like, very quick to say like, "Well, you actually ended up working on most of that, so you should go talk to the press." So she put me in positions that I don't think many people get that early in their career, and it really became the launch pad for a lot of the success I've had since then. And to be able to call her a close friend today is not only a testament to like who she is as a boss, but just who she is as a person.
Oh, I love that so much. What's something you're trying to learn right now?
Oh, okay. So there's a keyboard back there. I
I
am
see it.
yeah, so I grew up playing piano, but as most kids, I didn't take it very seriously, and
Mhm.
I, really just did it because my parents told me I had to, practice and play, but I've really come to love and, like, want to nurture that skill a bit more, so I've, been spending some time just trying to, like, learn, some, like, classical pieces and, on a more, like, lighthearted side, I was obsessed with making pancakes when we first moved to the UK because I couldn't find a pancake place here that was
Yeah.
what I was expecting from, coming from the US in terms of, like, pancakes. They're, like, very flat and not, like, fluffy pancakes here. So, I, learned to make pancakes, and now that I feel like I've kind of mastered pancakes, I'm very interested in learning how to make pancakes from different parts of the world. So, we
Oh,
just
yeah.
went to Austria for the holidays, and their pancake is called Schmarrn,
Great.
and I figured out from one of their most famous places, Demel. I asked the chef behind there making, their version of pancakes, like, "Can you tell me how you're doing that? And, like, what is it you're doing right now?" And so I just watched them for, like, a half hour make pancakes in front of me.
Wow.
And my goal for 2025 is to learn how to make Austrian pancakes, which are called Kaiserschmarrn. So that's another side one that I'm very excited to learn to do.
I love this so much, and now I think everyone's gonna start thinking like, "Oh my gosh, there are different pancakes in the world." Like, I don't
So
even think I thought of the only other pancake I can think of is like a Chinese a scallion pancake or
oh,
whatever. I never
those
even
are
thought about.
those are also delicious, but,
Oh, so
there's
good.
there's, like yeah,
But you're going with the sweet variety?
sweet variety, but also just, like, the care it takes to learn and be disciplined to become, like, exceptional at something, I think is something
Mm,
everyone should do regardless of what it is.
mm,
So, if you love eating, then figure out how to make something that you like eating, but, like, be really good at it. And if you like, sports, or if you like being athletic, or if you like health and wellness and fitness, like, I really don't care what it is, but I love hearing people who are passionate about something and then pushing themselves to be excellent at it. Like, that's something that I think
yeah.
is a trait that we don't get to indulge in enough, and for the most part, people think like, oh, well, that's what I'm focusing with my career, and I'm trying to like be excellent at that. But I think having a side passion or a hobby or project
Yeah,
really can help cultivate all these other parts of your, life perspective, brain, if you will, and
absolutely.
yeah, a more well-rounded and balanced life.
Yeah, I could not agree more with that. What's something you're trying to unlearn?
Unlearn. Whew, this might be controversial. Um, I'm gonna say it anyways. Uh,
Let's hear it.
I'm trying to unlearn a little bit of marketing.
Mm,
I was able to sit at the crossroads of I'll call it like more traditional marketing, and I genuinely thought that I had a battle tested playbook on how to win in marketing and be relevant in culture and do all these things. And it worked for all these different brands from different industries. But when I was in my role at TikTok, it was almost like sitting with one foot in this world where I was like, okay, we know how to do this really well. And then one foot in, oh my gosh, the future is going to change. I wonder if people are ready for it. And recognizing that if you, for the first time, took the same philosophy or principles in more traditional marketing and you applied it in a post TikTok world, you won't
mm,
like you literally just won't win. And so I'm trying to really figure out case studies and learn. And I've been advising a few companies and testing these theories that I have and seeing them succeed in this like post sort of short form video world and recognizing that I have to unlearn some of the things that I thought were tried and true things in marketing in order to help these brands win in the space. And that also means by practicing it right now and seeing it happen with, some brands and some groups and friends that I'm advising, how do I now scale that and show more people that the way that you thought you had to do marketing and the things that you probably learned for the last 20 to 30 years won't actually help you win, and you're gonna be kicking yourself and trying to figure out why it's not working. But
yep,
because I was sitting in a very particular spot, which was, like, in the center of it all at TikTok, it was almost like getting a glimpse into the future, what would, unfold and recognizing, like, "Oh my gosh, if I don't share this with as many friends as possible, they're gonna become very, disappointed the results that they'll see
yeah.
their marketing teams, in the next couple of years." So I'm seeing that start to manifest itself now, and yeah, trying to talk to some folks and understand more how this change in content consumption and everything is going to actually require people to think about how they do marketing and media buying and planning differently.
That's fascinating on so many levels. There's like post Tik, and then there's post TikTok.
Yes, yes.
Literally so relevant right now.
So
We
relevant
won't
right now.
dive in.
All those things that are happening with TikTok, as in like the learnings, are gonna apply to all other short form video platforms as well because they've
Yeah.
all nice to try to be similar to how content
Mhm.
is distributed. So this isn't like oh, there's a new platform or a new, channel that people are using. There's a fundamental difference in how content is being brought to people that's fundamentally changing the advertising, marketing, and media
Yeah.
game. And that's where I am trying to like consciously unlearn some of the things that I thought were like tried and true principles.
It's so good on so many levels. It's so disruptive, it's innovative. Literally, you're just speaking innovation language right now. Like the industry has been disrupted, is continuing to disrupt itself, and I don't think it's controversial. I think it's wise, and I also think that you might have some kind of book about unlearning this. Like, I think that might be in your future, and
I will
like,
start to, yeah, think about that for sure.
yeah, yeah, I think you got a whole bucket of inspiration even from this conversation that we were
Yeah.
sharing today. I think, that's I'm looking forward to it, even though I just assigned you a book to write. Um, okay, few more questions. Oh, name a book or a movie that changed your life.
Name a book or a movie that changed my life. That is so hard and something I probably should have looked at before. Because I love books and I love movies. the book that kind of changed my perspective on things, is actually, The Giving Tree by Shel
Yeah.
Silverstein.
Oh,
Um,
what a good book.
that one's a great book that hits home, and every so often I reread it, even though it's, it's not that long, but
Mhm.
pull out different lessons and different perspectives, and also thinking about your stages of life and growth, um,
Yeah.
has always been a big thing for me to think about, especially like during my mid-career sabbatical. So, that's definitely one that it, it, it's it's a book that like I can reference often and still relate to at different parts of my life. Because when I was a kid, I had one perspective about it, and as I got older, I had different. And now
Mhm.
even older, I have a completely different perspective, and there's very few books that I can grow and have the perspectives adapt with my growth, so that's definitely one that I think sticks out.
I love that. I think that's a great one. It's a classic. When growth feels good, how do you celebrate?
When growth feels good, how do you celebrate? Can you give me, like, an idea like, a more context on, like,
Sure.
growth? Yeah.
Yeah, when you feel like you've achieved something or you've grown in a
Oh,
way that you're able to recognize it, when that growth feels good, how do you celebrate?
yeah, my personality is really, like, social in nature and more of an extrovert.
Mhm.
Um, but I find that there's a close group of friends, that I've had since high school and through college and even like through life now, like my very close group of friends, as well as like that same equivalent for my wife. So she has a group that
Mm.
it's like not only family, but also like friends. And that group is the group that we celebrate with. We go on trips with when we have something to celebrate. And
Mhm.
it's kind of a core identity thing where I feel like life is a team sport, and
Yeah.
you don't wanna go living life, as, like, an MVP without your team, and
Mm.
I think people often forget that if you live life as a team sport and in that mentality, not only do you have the support when you need it, but when you have that moments of growth like that you said and you can celebrate, it feels so much more satisfying to celebrate with the people that you were sort of like on that journey and playing with. So there's like that group that's close friends and like family, but there's
Yeah.
also that cohort of folks that like I grew up in the industry with. And so when we have the chance to celebrate a win together and go on like on a trip and do something with our families, it does feel more like a milestone that we've achieved, and now we can have that moment to celebrate. So I think, yeah, there's definitely an
I
element
love
of
that.
being with people, traveling, exploring something new, and then just being in a house and hanging out with the people that you love and you trust and you can be yourself around. That's how I like to celebrate.
I love that. And when growth feels hard, how do you take care of yourself?
Um, it's hard. There's like so many things that you know to do that you end up not doing. Um, I honestly think talking to someone, even for a short amount of time, matters a lot, and it makes you feel less isolated and less alone. I think when I was dealing with the whole issue with, TikTok and even other hard moments in my life where I felt like I was hitting a wall or had the rug pulled out from under me, I think that the community that sort of, embraced me and shared their perspectives made me realize that we shouldn't have to do it all alone and that there is so many, you know, frontiers and possibilities. As an example, I won't say who it was, but somebody else had a very public dismissal,
Mm.
after my situation for another company, and I felt very much, like, called to reach out to them and be a
Mm.
resource even though we didn't know each other, and
Mhm.
we're now friends, we talk and they were very clear to say that having me reach out and knowing that I experienced something very similar not too long before help them
Yeah.
realize that they could have a similar trajectory of growth and acceptance and also like moment to recharge and all these things. So being able to be that for them also helped heal me and recognize that I'd
Mm.
got through that myself to be able to help someone else through that. So I just think like if you have a partner, spouse, significant other, whatever it might be, or a close group of friends, or just somebody that you can share that burden with, it makes it a lot easier.
Yeah. Ugh, I think that's beautiful. What would your 8-year-old self say about the life you're living now?
Ooh, not even just my 8-year-old self. I'd say up to my 38-year-old self, they would be shocked. So from 8 to 38, I lived in Southern California. Well, actually from 38,
Mm.
maybe even a little older than that. I lived in Southern California and I had no intentions of ever moving. And my thought of
Mm,
being satisfied and excited about life would be to stay put, within 50 miles of where I was born. Like I just loved it so much that I think my 8-year-old self would be shocked that I found a life outside of Southern California. I think my 8-year-old self would be even more
mm.
shocked it's outside of the US, and I think that
Wow.
the opportunity to live abroad and travel the world, like we've been to 20 countries in the last 2 years, and to be able to have
Wow.
that proximity to other countries and cultures and languages, um, would have been impossible to my 8-year-old self. My 8-year-old self would have been like,
Mm.
"Oh, if you could just move, to a slightly bigger house, like, down the street, that'd be like a win. Be able to live, like, around the world or, the other side of the world and be able to experience all the things that we've experienced." I think my 8-year-old self would be like, "Nah, there's no way that's gonna happen."
Oh, you have little faith.
Yeah.
That's so great. I love that. That's a where in SoCal are you from?
I'm from Mission Viejo.
Okay, cool. I'm from SoCal too. I'm from Covina. I don't know if you
Oh, yeah.
know that
Yeah, yeah,
city,
yeah, of
but
course,
I'm
of
from
course. Yeah.
Yeah. Um, okay, last question. When you grow all the way up and you leave this life, what is it that you'll congratulate yourself on?
Oh, that's a tough one. Um, oh, that's a really tough one. So one of the things that I've been tallying and then I'm like always like keeping track of it is the number of CMOs that have grown from working with me. So like I have so far to date, there's 7 people that have worked on my teams who've now become CMOs in their own right for other companies. And
Wow.
my goal is to go back to teach marketing one day, in a grad program. Like that's my dream job. And
Yeah.
I think that it's impossible for as much as I used to say, like, my vision for my career was to impact pop culture at scale, I do feel like I've been able to do that with the places that I've worked at, whether it's TikTok
Mhm.
or Hulu and Disney or Samsung or wherever it might be. So, I realized, like, you can only reach so many different groups, people, individuals, unless are fortunate to hit something like a TikTok where you're reaching a lot of people. But,
Mm.
I think in order to really move a generation and to drive societal change, I'd have to figure out how to scale that even further. And if I could just share some principles and some philosophies and elements that help a new group of marketers succeed and then impact brands and culture and things, exponentially more than what I could do,
Mm.
I think I'd be very happy if the group that I was able to help lead not only became leaders, but became kind leaders that drove positive change in the world. I think that would be something that I would congratulate myself with.
I think that's so beautiful, and it's gonna happen. It's gonna happen, Nick. I'm excited to see you continue to have that kind of impact. I can't wait for your book that you
And I'm
didn't say you were gonna write, and I can't wait for you to, teach and, all of this. I just know that this is gonna happen for you. Thank you so much
Yeah,
for your time today and for
of
sharing.
course.
I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me.
All right. Okay, bye, y'all.